It's not too late to make a knitted or crocheted Halloween pumpkin. Here I've knitted a piece in fisherman's rib, and what I can do is join to make a side seam and then gather the bottom and either stuff it or put sweeties in the top and then gather that, and that will make a pumpkin. This has been made in fisherman's rib, that's what gives it the texture, and I'll show you how to work fisherman's rib. To work fisherman's rib, I cast on a number of stitches in the usual way, use whichever is your favourite technique, and then work the first row in standard knit one, purl one, single rib. Now I'm going to work the next row. Instead of putting the needle in the knit stitch as I normally would, I put it in the knit stitch in the row below. So when I make the next stitch, the knit stitch is actually worked through not only the stitch on the needle, but also the stitch on the row below. The purl stitch is worked in the normal way. So purl is worked in the normal way, and when I come to the next knit stitch, instead of putting the needle into the stitch on the needle, I put the working needle into the knit stitch on the row below, and then I make the stitch. So the purl stitch in the normal way, and then the knit stitch working into the stitch on the row below. This creates a spongy textured fabric that helps us to represent the structure of the pumpkin, the way it has a ribbed look about it. I work the last stitch as a normal knit stitch. When I get to the end of the row and I change over the needles, the same thing happens. I slip the first stitch, but in the next knit stitch I knit into the knit stitch on the row below, and then I purl the purl stitches as normal. So this is called fisherman's rib. So I've sewn up the seam at the side and I've joined in another piece of yarn. I'm going to weave it in between the stitches at the bottom of the ribbing so that I can gather it up to close up the bottom of the pumpkin. So now I've worked all the way around the base of the pumpkin, and I'm going to draw this closed to close up the base of the pumpkin, and you can see how the rib comes together in the centre to give that ribbed pumpkin look. So here I've stuffed the pumpkin with just some scrunched up kitchen paper, just as an example to give it a bit of shape. Take the needle through between the stitches to gather them together to close the pumpkin. Now as I draw it closed, as I did at the other end, you can see that it's quite round. If we want to give it the traditional pumpkin shape, then what we can do is take the needle through to the bottom of the pumpkin and sew it through to give it that slightly squashed shape. So here we've got our finished pumpkin, so slightly squashed to give it that traditional shape. And what we could do is we could add a little bit of green to make a stalk, or we could put something like a little stick of cinnamon in, or we could even make a little leaf. So there is our knitted Halloween pumpkin. If you wanted to, you could also get some stick-on eyes, or you could embroider eyes and some teeth to make it look like a carved pumpkin. Happy Halloween.